Welcome to the Midweek message. We're taking some lessons from the book of 1 John, and I'm reading in 1 John chapter 3, verses 19 through 22, and these verses are from the New English translation of the Bible. 1 John 3:19. And by this we will know that we are of the truth and will convince our conscience in his presence. That if our conscience condemns us, that God is greater than our conscience and knows all things. Dear friends, if our conscience does not condemn us, we have confidence in the presence of God. And whatever we ask, we receive from him because we keep his commandments and do the things that are pleasing to him. Now we're going to look at these verses individually. 1 John 3:19. And by this we will know that we are of the truth and will convince our conscience in his presence. By what? By loving God, loving others, and keeping his commandments, doing the things that he wants us to do. That's what is led up to verse 19. By this, we know that we are of the truth. We understand that our faith, our Christianity, our belief is genuine. It is real, because we are following what we say with what we do. And we'll convince our conscience in his presence. Now, we're going to talk about the conscience here in some depth, not a great deal, but when we act in accordance with our stated beliefs, our conscience is affirmed, it is strengthened, it is validated in our presence and in our mind, but also in the presence of God. Now, if you say that you believe something and don't do it, then your conscience is weakened, because your conscience is a continual convicting source in you. You know you're guilty. Your conscience kicks in. However, if you know you're of the truth because you are following your stated beliefs with actions, then your conscience is convinced in your own mind and also in the mind of God. You have proved out your belief. You have shown your faith by your works, in a manner of speaking. Verse 20. That if our conscience condemns us, that God is greater than our conscience and knows all things. Now, this is an interesting verse to me. Just because you have a conscience toward some activity or some belief, some action, just because you have a conscience toward it does not mean your conscience is right. Your conscience may be wrong, because your conscience is informed by the way you were raised, your experiences in life, and your conscience, acting in accordance with it, is a good thing. It's serious to violate your conscience, but your conscience is not always correct. And sometimes your conscience will condemn you, but God is greater than your conscience. God is able to direct you into the right way of believing. It's very common for people, especially if they get to be my age or very nearly to it, they will say things like, well, I used to believe this, but then I understood that this is not the correct belief, and I've changed my belief. And so that's not always compromise. It's not always wrong. But God's greater than your conscience. You may have a conscience that convicts you towards something that's not actually wrong. You don't know all things, but God does. And verse 21, dear friends, if our conscience does not condemn us, we have confidence in the presence of God. When your conscience is clear, and when it's right in the sight of God, when it is consistent, when it is validated, when it is toward the right things, then you have confidence in the presence of God. It's best if your conscience doesn't condemn you, because you have a clearer way of thinking, a more validated life in your own mind, but also God can confirm that and affirm you within and by the presence of the Holy Spirit. It's best if your conscience doesn't condemn you and you've got a clear conscience. And there are some matters of conscience that are going to vary between people, and it's not necessarily wrong. One person doesn't believe they should do a certain thing. They've got a feeling toward it that somebody else doesn't have, maybe because of their experience. This would not refer to baseline morality, but it would refer to some ethical things that are within the realm of what we might call Christian liberty or living under God. There's going to be some difference between individuals. But God knows all things. We don't know all things, and so we need to be open to allow God to direct our consciences. And verse 22, and whatever we ask, we receive of him because we keep his commandments and do the things that are pleasing to him. Answered prayer is a benefit of pleasing God and a benefit of keeping our conscience clear. And we do the things that are pleasing to God. We keep his commandments, and God answers our prayers if they are in God's plan for us. A woman who passed from her sickness once told my wife and I, we will be happy with the things that God gives us if we have decided to be content with his gifts. You will always have what you want if you want what you have.